I don't know why I spoke. Maybe because the room felt too empty to hold what I'd just read. "I believe you," I whispered. The words sounded too loud. The lamp flame shrank, then steadied, as if the air itself had stopped moving. I wrapped the book back in its cloth and told myself I was done. That I would sleep and wake and laugh at myself for being dramatic. I lay down. At first there was only ordinary quiet. Then I felt it. Not a draft, not the bed settling. A deliberate dip, like someone sitting at the foot of the mattress. My breath caught so hard it hurt. A voice spoke close enough to be real. Calm, almost amused. "Most of us did," she said. "Deserve better, I mean." People said I was mad long before she appeared. It starts as a joke, tied to your name like a paper tail. Book mad, ink-sleeved, that scholar goo who never looks up. And then one day the laughter is gone, and the word stays. But I wasn't mad. I was alone, and books were better company than most people. My lodging sat above a print shop. One room, peeling plaster, a low bed, a narrow table, a lamp that flickered whenever the wind found a crack under the door. By day I copied texts for a few coins. By night I studied for examinations I kept failing. When my eyes blurred too badly for study, I read. Anything with words, because reading was the only way I knew to keep the world from closing in. I remember the day I found her book because it was cold, and because I hadn't meant to buy anything at all. The market street was damp with leftover rain, stones slick underfoot, the sky already the colour of wet ink. An old man sat behind 3 planks laid across crates, his second-hand volumes spread out like fish at the end of the day, most of them ruined. I was about to pass when I saw it. A thin book wrapped in faded blue cloth. Not expensive cloth, not pretty, but the knot was careful, tight, centred, deliberate. The kind of knot you tie when you expect someone to return and open it again. My fingers were numb when I reached for it. "Those are damaged," the stall-keeper grunted. "You won't want them." "May I see this one?" He shrugged, as if it didn't matter. The cloth was stiff, but the book inside was clean. Thin, plain brown cover, no title, no author. When I opened it, I expected printed characters. Instead, there was handwriting on the inside cover. Fine strokes, dark ink gone to charcoal grey. This is the story of a woman who died before anyone believed her. The words were clear. The street noise fell away. I should have closed it. I should have put it back. But the stall-keeper coughed, and my hands, traitorous, curious, turned the page anyway. Inside, the book was wrong in a way I couldn't name at first. It wasn't purely printed text or a journal. Printed lines ran straight and polite, someone trying to make a life look acceptable. But between them, in the margins, and in places where whole sentences had been scraped away, another hand had moved in. Neat strokes, controlled pressure, the kind of handwriting that stays beautiful even when it's furious. Halfway down the first page, her voice appeared as plainly as if she'd stepped into the room. My name was Yan Shumei. They wrote, died young, without issue. They didn't write why, past tense, not humble, not asking permission. I should have put the book back. A poor scholar doesn't buy mysteries. But the market was closing, and my fingers were already folding the blue cloth around it again, already putting coins down, before I could talk myself out of it. I walked home with it tucked under my arm like contraband, too light to matter, and somehow heavy anyway. That night, I didn't copy texts. I didn't practice characters. I lit my oil lamp, shut the window against the wind, and sat at my little table with a cup of weak tea that tasted like resignation. I untied the cloth, opened the book. The sentence on the inside cover stared up at me like a dare. This is the story of a woman who died before anyone believed her. All right, I murmured, as if she could hear me. Tell me. The printed text began the way official lies always begin. Tidy, neutral, a household, a daughter raised to be modest, a marriage described like a line item. But the margins kept interrupting. The printed text praised, the margins corrected. The printed text said she was cold. The margin answered, tight, controlled, almost too calm. I wasn't cold. I was tired of being afraid. There's a difference. I read faster after that, like my hands were trying to catch up to a truth that kept slipping sideways under polite ink. Her voice wasn't rambling, it was precise. Small cuts in the right places, every correction placed like a finger pushing your face toward what you're refusing to see. By the time I reached the last page, the lamp had burned low. My tea was cold, my eyes ached. The printed text ended neatly, like a door shutting. Fell into melancholy and took her own life. Thus she came to her rest. In the margin, her handwriting flared, darker, sharper than anywhere else, as if the pen had finally stopped pretending. Lies, all of it. I did not take my own life, and they did not grieve. They were relieved. My rest came later. Below that, crowded into the last remaining space, as if she'd fought the paper itself, were a few final words. If anyone is reading this, if anyone still cares about the truth, remember me as I was, not as they wrote me. My name was Yan Shumei. I stared at the lines until my eyes stung. Then, without planning to, without knowing why, I said her name out loud. Yan Shumei, I murmured. Yan Shumei. The lamp guttered. Outside, the wind shouldered the window frame once, twice. A draught slipped under the door and kissed the back of my neck like a warning. My chest tightened, not with fear exactly, something closer to shame. I believe you, I said quietly, surprising myself. My voice sounded too loud in the small room. I don't know what happened to you, but I believe you weren't what they said. The flame dipped again, then steadied, like the air itself had paused to listen. I closed the book gently, the way you close something alive, and wrapped it back in its blue cloth. My eyes burned. I should have gone to bed. Instead, I sat there, staring at the shape of it on the table, at the thin line of lamplight under the door, at the shadow of my own hand on the wall. You deserved better, I whispered into the silence. And that was when someone on the other side of the room quietly answered me. I dropped my cup. Lukewarm tea spilled across the floor. I hadn't heard the door open. That was the first thing that told me something was wrong. The second was the voice. Clear, calm, far too close.
Most of us did. Deserve better, I mean.
My heart slammed so hard I tasted iron. I turned, chair legs shrieking against the floor. There was a woman sitting at the foot of my bed. Not a blur, not a shadow. A woman, hands folded neatly in her lap, spine straight, posture composed enough to belong in a formal hall rather than my narrow, rented room. The oil lamp cut her face in half with light. The other half remained in shadow, patient and unafraid. I could not move. She studied me for a moment, then, not irritated, not amused, tired.
If you faint, we'll both have a problem,
she said. My breath came back in pieces. You, I swallowed. You shouldn't be here.
I shouldn't be anywhere, but we seem to have passed that point.
Her gaze shifted, not to me but to the table. The book lay there, wrapped in its faded blue cloth, exactly where I had left it.
You read very quickly,
she said. That, absurdly, was the thing that anchored me. I followed her eyes, then looked back at her. She was young, about my age. Her robe was plain, unadorned, the white too clean for the street below. Her hair was bound simply, no ornaments, no effort to impress. If I had seen her in daylight, I might have thought she belonged somewhere better than this building. Seeing her here, at night, I thought something else entirely. This is impossible.
You read to the end, and you still look surprised.
My mouth felt dry. Yan Xiumei, I said. The name landed between us like a held breath.
Yes, that will do.
I sat down hard, legs failing me. You're dead, I said.
Yes.
The word was clean, settled, finished. I pressed my hands flat to my knees, as if the pressure might hold the room in place. I must be dreaming,
If you are,
she said.
you should consider cleaning more often. There's tea on the floor.
I glanced down. The overturned cup lay where it had fallen earlier, the spill already dried into a pale stain. I looked back at her. She was still there. What do you want? I asked. This time she did not answer immediately. The amusement faded from her face. The lamplight caught the line of her cheekbone, the hollow at the base of her throat.
You already gave it to me. You believed me.
My voice faltered. I said I did.
Yes,
She inclined her head.
that's more than almost anyone managed while I was alive.
The lamp flickered. I remembered the last page, the furious ink pressed into the margins. You didn't take your own life, I said quietly. Her eyes did not leave mine.
No.
The room felt suddenly smaller. I went on. It was,
Murder.
she said, without hesitation. The word did not shake her. It shook me. Outside something moved. A footstep, a door, ordinary life continuing, without the slightest regard for what had just been said in my room. My heart pounded hard enough to hurt. They wrote over you, I said. The book, the record.
Yes. They corrected me, smoothed me, made me easier to bury.
And you stayed, I whispered, between the lines. She studied me, as if deciding how much truth I could hold.
I learned that ink lasts longer than breath.
A chill ran through me. How are you here? I asked.
I was tied, wrapped, sold,
She said.
for less than the cost of the paper. And then you opened me.
I only bought a book.
And read it, carefully, all of it. And you spoke my name.
Her voice softened, not warmth, but precision.
It's been a long time since anyone did that.
Something tight pulled behind my ribs. I'm no one, I said. A failed scholar. I copy other men's words for rent. She regarded me with a faint, unreadable patience.
And yet, you listened when it would have been easier not to.
The lamp guttered again. Who did this to you? I asked. She did not answer at once. When she did, it was not with a name.
He is praised. He was promoted. That should tell you enough.
A pulse of anger cut through my fear. They rewarded him. They rewarded what he represents. I stood abruptly. I stopped myself. I don't know what I should do. She rose as well. She did not look fragile. She looked contained.
You don't need to do anything.
That's not true, I replied. She watched me carefully now.
Belief is already expensive.
I don't care,
That is how this becomes dangerous.
she said quietly. For a moment, neither of us moved.
My name is Yan Shulmei.
I'm Ju Wenyuan, I answered without thinking. She inclined her head. Then, just before the lamp finally went dark, she said,
If you continue, Master Ju, the world will notice you.
The flame went out. The room fell into darkness. I did not feel alone, but, for the first time, I understood that believing her was not kindness. It was a choice. Over the next few weeks, my nights became a routine. Studying, tea, more studying, and sometimes her. Somewhere in that time, fear turned into familiarity, and familiarity turned into something I tried not to name. Then, one night, after the lamp burned low and the room should have gone empty, she stayed. When my eyes adjusted, she stood near the table, the book between us like a boundary neither of us crossed.
You should sit.
I am sitting.
You're about to stop.
I sat back down. She watched me with an expression I had not seen before. Not amusement, not patience. Calculation. As if she were weighing the cost of telling me something that could not be taken back.
You asked who did this. Before I answer, you need to understand something.
I waited.
My death was not an accident. But neither was it sudden. If I tell you only the end, it will sound simple. It wasn't.
I folded my hands together to stop them shaking. Tell me anyway. She nodded once.
My husband liked order. Quiet rooms, smooth voices. A wife who understood when to disappear.
The word husband landed heavily.
Official Zhao Shuren.
I inhaled sharply. I knew the name. He was promoted last year, I said.
Yes.
The confirmation felt like a blow. They rewarded him, I said.
They rewarded consistency. Men like him are useful. He did not strike often. He preferred methods that left no mark. Words. Isolation. Smiles that made other people laugh while I stood there, wondering why I was the only one not laughing.
I clenched my jaw.
When I protested, I was emotional. When I was silent, I was cold. When I tried to explain, I was difficult. Do you know what that does to a person?
Her gaze lifted to mine. Yes, I said before I could stop myself. Something in her eyes softened. Not relief, but recognition.
The night I died, we argued about money. He had taken from the household accounts. I found the record.
You confronted him, and he didn't like that.
Yes.
No.
There were stairs. He pushed me. Whether he meant to kill me, that no longer matters. They wrote that I was melancholy, that I threw myself down in a fit of temper. A woman's despair is very convenient.
My chest hurt. And no one questioned it.
One maid did. They dismissed her, called her hysterical. The dead cannot give testimony.
She paused. Silence filled the room. I stood abruptly and crossed to the table. My hands hovered over the book without touching it. They erased you, I said, then promoted him.
Yes.
I turned to her. And you expect me to live with that?
I expect you to survive,
she said quietly. That's not the same thing.
You're angry,
she said. Yes.
and frightened.
Yes. She studied me carefully.
Good. Both of those will keep you alive if you listen to them.
I laughed once, harsh and breathless. I'm no one, I said, on paper. Her gaze sharpened.
That is the problem.
I met her eyes. Then I'll stop being no one. She took a step toward me. The distance between us closed, not rushed, not deliberate, simply inevitable.
Gu Wenyuan. If you walk into a yamen tomorrow with this anger, they will crush you.
I know.
If you speak my name without a title behind yours, they will laugh.
I know.
If you pursue this properly, it will take years. Her breath caught, just barely. You could fail again. You already have.
I did not hesitate. Then I'll take years. I failed for nothing, I replied. This is different.
You would do this? For me?
For the truth, I said. And for you. The words settled between us. Dangerous. Honest.
I never wanted to be someone's reason. Reasons get people killed.
Her hand lifted, stopped halfway. She did not touch me. A silence passed, thick, charged. Then she stepped closer, not into my arms, just close enough that I could feel her presence, the steadiness of it.
If you choose this path, you don't do it as my avenger. You do it as a man who understands how the world actually works. And you do not rush. You prepare.
I know. I exhaled slowly. Then I'll study, I said. Again. Her eyes closed for a brief moment. When they opened, there was something there that frightened me more than her death. Hope.
Then, we begin carefully.
She stepped back. The space she left behind felt colder than before. That night, when I lay awake staring at the ceiling, her words would not leave me. Not murder, paper, authority, time, and beneath all of it, a quieter truth I did not yet dare name. I did not want to win justice only for the dead. I wanted to be worthy of the living woman who had trusted me with her story. She did not appear the next night. At first I told myself it meant nothing. The ghosts were not bound by schedules, that expectation was a foolish habit of the living. I lit the lamp anyway. I opened the book, read. The room stayed empty. Not haunted, just waiting. I read until the words began to blur, until my eyes ached and my back stiffened from the chair. I read past places I knew by heart, past her handwriting, past the fury and the sharp corrections, searching for something that had never been written. At some point, I realized I was listening more than reading. I looked up. She stood near the window, half-formed, as if the lamplight had not yet decided how much of her it could hold. I was on my feet before I thought about it. "You're late," I said.
You noticed?
Her mouth curved faintly. "You weren't here," I corrected.
I was, just thinner.
The word landed badly. I crossed the room without asking permission, stopped when I was close enough that reaching out would have been instinct. "What's happening?" I asked. She did not answer immediately. Instead, she looked at the book, then at the lamp, then at me.
You're anchoring me.
My chest tightened. By reading?
By deciding.
I frowned. That doesn't make sense.
It does. You've stopped being a place I can rest. You're becoming a direction.
I didn't like the sound of that. "You told me to prepare," I said, "to be careful."
I did. And you listened.
She agreed. Her outline wavered slightly, like ink disturbed by water. I reached out without thinking. My hand passed through her sleeve. Not air, not warmth. Something resistant, like touching the surface of a pond without breaking it. We both froze. Her breath caught, a sound she did not need to make.
You shouldn't,
she said softly. "I know," I said. Neither of us moved.
I won't disappear tonight. Not yet.
But
you need to understand the cost. You cannot carry me and move forward at the same time. Not forever.
the room felt suddenly too small. "I didn't ask you to leave," I said.
I know.
"And I don't want you to," I added. She met my eyes.
I know that too. That was the problem. You're still thinking like a man who believes love is something you can hold still.
She said gently. I swallowed. I'm thinking like a man who finally knows what he's holding. Her expression softened, not into relief, but into something more dangerous. Care.
I stayed because you listened. I stayed because you believed me. I stayed because you spoke my name like it mattered.
I nodded, unable to speak.
But if I stay much longer, you will stop living toward the world and start living toward me.
I don't see the difference, I said quietly. She stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint blur at the edges of her form, the way the lamplight refused to settle on her properly.
That is because you're kind.
Her hand lifted. She hesitated, then rested her fingers lightly against my chest. Not pressing, just there. I felt it anyway. You're already changing.
Your posture, your attention, the way you listen for footsteps that aren't there.
I don't regret being with you, I said. Her gaze flickered, not away, but looking at me.
Nor I you,
she said. For a moment, neither of us moved. I want to kiss her. I want to embrace her. But we are just two people standing in a room that could not hold what was growing inside it. I will study, I said finally. I will pass. I will take the long road. She nodded. And when I speak your name, I continued, it will be in a room where it cannot be erased. Her fingers slipped from my chest.
That is the right kind of love,
she said softly, then stepped back. Her outline thinned further, the lamplight failing her now.
I won't be gone tomorrow, but I won't always be this close.
My throat burned. I'll leave the lamp lit, I said.
I know.
I stood there long after she was gone, hand still raised where her touch had been. Then I sat down, opened my notes, and for the first time in years, I did not study because I was afraid of failing. I studied because I had chosen what would happen if I succeeded. I thought deciding to take the examinations again would feel triumphant. It didn't. It felt like standing at the foot of a mountain with nothing but my bare hands and realizing, with sudden clarity, that the mountain did not care what I wanted. The next morning, I sat cross-legged on the floor, my old scrolls unfurled around me like relics from a life I had already failed at once. The edges were soft from years of handling. The ink had thinned in places where my fingers had traced the same passages again and again, hoping repetition could force my brain into brilliance. I had failed before, barely scraped silver rank the last provincial test, and now I was aiming higher, much higher, because this time the reward was not a modest post or my father's grudging approval. It was the right to speak her name where lies had been carved in official ink. I began anyway, hour after hour, day after day. At the print shop, I copied other men's words until my wrist cramped. At night, I tried to make my own worthy of men who would look down on me before I even opened my mouth. I read model essays aloud until my voice went hoarse. I copied them until the candle wicks trembled and drowned in their own wax. I slept in scraps, head on the table, cheek stuck to a page, waking with the sour taste of old tea and ink and shame. Some nights she sat nearby, silent, watching. Her presence didn't make the work easier, it made it sharper. When she was there, I could feel the weight of her eyes. Not accusing, not demanding, just there, steady as a hand on the spine of a book. And sometimes, when I stopped too long, staring at a sentence as if it were a wall I couldn't climb, she touched my shoulder lightly.
Again,
she would murmur, and I would. Other nights she wasn't there at all. Those were worse than any insult the printmaster ever shouted at me. The first time she failed to appear, I nearly tore apart the room looking for the book, convinced something had happened to her, something worse than death. I lifted bedding, I checked beneath the table, I ran my hands along the cracked plaster, as if a woman made of ink could have slipped into a seam. When she returned the night after, she said only,
I drifted.
"Drifted where?" I demanded, the relief turning into anger too fast to stop. She shook her head once, a small motion that made her edges shimmer.
Where the dead go when they don't want to be seen.
"So you didn't want to see me?" I blurted, and hated myself as soon as I said it.
That isn't it. Sometimes I worry I'm keeping you from your life.
She said gently. "My life is this," I said, harsher than I meant. "You're the reason I'm doing any of it." A shadow crossed her face, quick, quiet, like a page turning.
That,
She said,
is exactly what I mean.
and still she sat beside me. Still she leaned close enough that I could feel cold air gather where her sleeve passed, as if the room itself remembered she shouldn't be here. Still, when I slumped forward in exhaustion, she pressed her cool palm to the back of my neck, and the tension in my skull loosened, as if someone had untied a knot.
Rest.
She whispered. And I did, because when she said it, rest felt like obedience to something sacred. Weeks passed, winter thinned. My candles burned lower each night. My eyes reddened from strain. My fingers cracked from cold and ink. People at the print shop started whispering openly that I'd finally gone mad, muttering passages under my breath, staring at blank paper as if someone else stood behind it. I didn't care. What frightened me wasn't their opinion. It was how slowly my mind grew sharper. How, once in a while, a paragraph I wrote didn't feel like imitation, just mine. And then, like a knife slid between ribs, doubt would return. What if I reach the examination hall and they see I don't belong? What if I pass the writing and fail the room? The bows, the smiles, the invisible rules. What if I get close enough to touch an official's lie and they crush me for it? Each night I confessed these fears to her. Each night she answered differently, never soothing me in the same way twice.
You are cleverer than you think. You're stubborn enough to survive anything. You owe the world nothing, but you owe yourself the truth of what you can do.
Some nights she looked at me as if she were memorizing me, as if the living fade too quickly for her to hold on to. One night I asked, quieter, "Xiumie, what happens when you drift?" She hesitated, and in that hesitation, I heard the truth coming before she said it. I reached for her hand. She let me take it. Her fingers were cool, firm, real enough to hurt.
I start forgetting. Little things. The smell of plums, the sound of my own steps, the weight of being alive. The more I fade, the more the world lets go of me.
She admitted softly. My throat tightened. "And when you return?" I asked. She smiled. "You remind me." "You won't fade," I said.
You can't promise that.
She whispered. But she didn't pull away. Then came the first real door closing. A message arrived from my father. I hadn't heard from him in 2 years, not since my last failure. The paper was stiff and expensive, the characters neat and cold, as if emotion itself were improper to spend ink on. "I hear you intend to sit the examinations again. Do not embarrass the family a second time. If you do not pass, do not return." No greeting, no signature, just that. I stared at it until the words swam. Xiumei read over my shoulder. She didn't speak. I crumpled the paper in my fist so hard it cut my palm. "So that's it," I said. "Failure means exile."
No. Failure means choosing your own life instead of the one they wrote for you.
She said quietly. "I don't have my own life," I snapped. "I have this. Studying. You. And anger."
And hope.
She added, simple as a fact. The word made my eyes sting. I hated that more than the letter. What if I can't do it? I whispered. What if I reach the gate and they see I don't belong? She lifted a finger and pressed it lightly against my lips, not silencing, not scolding.
You are allowed to be afraid, but you are not allowed to stop.
I closed my eyes. She kissed my forehead. My breath came slow. The night before the spring term began, she appeared at my side with a faint, wavering glow around her edges, so subtle I might have missed it, if I hadn't started noticing everything about her like a starving man notices food. "Xiumei," I murmured. "You look thin."
It happens.
When the season changes, when the world grows busy with the living, will you disappear?
Not disappear, just drift more easily. You mustn't depend on me to steady your hand through what comes next.
She corrected. "I need you," I said, too honest to soften it. She touched my cheek, cool and gentle.
No, you want me. That's different. Wanting is allowed, but leaning too heavily isn't.
I opened my mouth to argue, but she shook her head. A small, sad smile curved her lips.
You must be able to stand in that examination hall without looking for me over your shoulder. That is the first test, though no examiner will ever mark it.
The next nights she didn't come. I lit the lamp anyway, opened the book anyway, studied. And somewhere in that silence, heavy, aching, unfamiliar, something inside me settled. She had trusted me to walk this part without her. So I did. When the exam results were posted, I didn't run to see them. I walked. Slowly, deliberately. My heart pounded hard enough to bruise my ribs, but I kept my steps even. The younger men shoved past, tripping over each other, laughing, cursing, pointing at the tall red board. Names rippled through the crowd like stones skipping over water. I pushed closer. There it was. Not at the very top, but high enough that nobody could call it luck. High enough that a single character beside it glittered like a seal pressed in wax. Appointed. For a moment, everything went quiet. No voices, no footsteps, no wind. Just that word, burning into my eyes. Appointed. I walked home on legs that hardly felt like mine. The lamp in my room was already lit. The book lay open on the table, its blue cloth cover smoothed flat. She was there, leaning against the window frame, arms loosely folded, watching me with that half-guarded softness I had come to hoard like coins.
Well?
My lips felt numb. I passed. The words sounded absurdly small in my own ears. Her smile broke over her face like sunlight through storm clouds.
I know.
How? I managed.
Heaven was noisy today. You made quite a demand.
I laughed, a rough, broken sound. My hands were shaking. I crossed the room and pulled her into my arms. It was like stepping into a river in winter. The sense of a body without warmth. She was there. Not an illusion, not a dream, but my arms closed around a shape the world refused to fully admit. Still, she didn't pull away. Her hands came up to rest lightly on my shoulders, no heavier than moths brushing cloth.
You did it. For yourself. For the truth. For me.
She whispered against my chest. Yes, I said, my voice cracking under the weight of all three. Now what?
You learned to wear a mask,
she said, drawing back just enough to look into my face. The first week of my appointment, I watched men smile without meaning it and nodded until my neck ached. I learned which compliments cost nothing and bought everything. I learned to bow at the right depth, to laugh at the right moment, to let a fool believe he had won a point so he wouldn't notice what I'd taken. I carried my ink-stained hands into rooms that smelled of sandalwood and power, and I kept my face still. At night, I returned to my narrow lodging and shut the door and let my shoulders drop. She would sit on the bed or the stool by the table and look at me as if memorizing the man beneath the mask.
Did you lie today?
Yes, I said. She asked once.
Good. Use their language until you can rewrite their sentences.
At dawn, I set my brush to the first practice scroll. Mine, wholly mine, not for my father, not only for her, for the truth, and for the man who had written lies in her blood. Official, Zhao Shuren, and because official, Zhao Shuren's clean, praised name did not deserve to remain clean. That was when the investigation truly began. Not loudly, not dramatically. The way a poor man starts any war, with what he can reach. I went back through my own memory first. Every notice I'd seen tacked up at tea houses, every public praise of diligent service, every casual mention of Zhao Shuren's transfers. I wrote them down in the margins of my work notes, as if they were part of the curriculum. Then I started asking questions that sounded like nothing. At the office, while copying routine summaries, I listened for names. At bookstalls, I asked for county gazetteers to improve my essays, and watched who suddenly grew polite when I mentioned his district. And when one of them said, laughing, "That Zhao fellow, lucky man, promoted out just when things got ugly," I smiled as if I didn't care and asked, "Ugly how?" He shrugged. "Floods, grain, petitions, who remembers? All smooth now." Smooth, a word I already hated. I wrote it down anyway, and when I returned home at night, alone with the lamp and the book and the ache that waited in my ribs, I whispered into the room as if she might hear me even while drifting. "I'm starting. I'm not rushing. I'm not wasting you. I'm starting." The flame didn't flicker, but the ink on the open page seemed, for a moment, darker, as if the story itself had listened. The first real proof did not announce itself. It arrived disguised as routine. I was 3 weeks into my appointment when my supervisor tossed a stack of older domestic incident files onto my desk and said, "These need indexing. Quiet work, good for your handwriting." Quiet work was always a lie. These were the records no one wanted often enough to memorize. Deaths ruled accidental, disputes resolved within the household, matters too small for public hearings and too private for scrutiny. They smelled of dust and old ink, and the particular fatigue of lies that have been sitting undisturbed for years. I worked through them slowly. Not because I was careful, because I was afraid of how fast my eyes had learned to hunt. I noted phrasing, repeated structures, familiar excuses, unfortunate, regrettable, melancholy disposition. The phrase appeared again and again, always where a person's voice should have been. Near the bottom of the stack, I felt it before I saw it. That slight hitch behind the eyes, the way a sentence refuses to sit quietly when it knows you. Wife, age 21. Disposition, melancholy. Cause, self-inflicted fall. Disposition closed. The handwriting was neat, official, confident. The name above it was not hers. It was his. Zhao Shuren. For a moment, the room narrowed to the width of the page. I didn't breathe. The date was wrong. Not obviously wrong. Not something a clerk could challenge without sounding foolish. But I had been listening, collecting, stacking impressions like loose tiles in my mind. The year matched the rumours, and the wording, self-inflicted fall, was the same phrasing used in 3 other cases I'd seen that morning, all tied to officials who later advanced without interruption. I copied the file number onto a scrap of paper and slid it into my sleeve like contraband. That night, I laid the document on the table beside the blue-wrapped book. She was already there. She didn't need to read it. She knew. Her gaze moved over the page with a stillness that frightened me more than anger would have. When she reached the end, her fingers hovered just above the characters. Not touching, never touching.
So they kept it.
You knew they would? I asked.
I hoped they wouldn't be so careless. Hope is a habit from life.
The lamplight caught the edge of her sleeve. It trembled. They called it a fall, I said. She gave a small, bitter laugh.
They always do. It sounds tidy. No hands involved.
My throat tightened. This isn't proof yet, not the kind that survives daylight.
No, but it's a thread.
I followed the thread. I requested adjacent files under the pretense of checking clerical consistency. I asked for shipping records, to understand household provisioning during administrative transitions. I compared dates, locations, signatures. Patterns emerged. Complaints submitted, then withdrawn. Witness statements summarized instead of quoted. Inspections stamped before inspections occurred. When I asked why certain annexes were missing, a junior clerk went pale and said they'd been misfiled during renovations. When I asked where the originals were stored, he swallowed and said, I'd have to ask. I smiled and said, Of course. He did not look reassured. At home, I told her everything. She listened without interrupting, eyes sharp, posture intent. Not a ghost waiting for justice, but a woman who had once learned exactly how men lied when they believed no one important was listening.
He'll notice. You're not subtle.
I know. I'm careful, I corrected. There's a difference. She studied me for a long moment.
You've changed.
I have to.
No, you're still you. You're just standing where you can be seen. You're tying yourself to this. To me.
I already did, I replied. Her mouth curved. Not into a smile exactly, but something softer, something more dangerous.
Then don't stop halfway. If you pull this thread, you pull it until it bleeds.
The next morning, a memorandum crossed my desk requesting clarification on my unusual interest in legacy domestic records. No accusation, just a question. The ink was fresh, the seal unfamiliar, and beneath it, written in a different hand, as if added after the fact. Proceed with discretion. I folded the paper and slid it into my sleeve beside the copied file number. That was when I understood. The mountain had noticed me, and Zhao Shu-ren was no longer the only one watching. The first warning arrived wrapped as courtesy. A carriage pulled alongside me one evening as I walked home from the Ya-men, its lacquered side gleaming like a mirror held too close to the face. The curtain lifted just enough for a voice to emerge, calm, cultivated, already assuming I would listen. "Honoured sir," someone said. "We're headed the same way. Please." The name he gave belonged to a man who had never needed to ask twice. I climbed in. Inside, the air smelled of incense and old money. The official opposite me was past the age of pretending to be dangerous, which made him far more so. His robes were immaculate. His hands rested loosely on his knees, as if nothing in the world required gripping. We spoke of small things first. The season, the difficulty of new appointments, how taxing it must be to balance diligence with restraint. Young men often confuse the two, he said mildly. They believe effort must always be visible. I find invisibility has its uses, I replied. His smile sharpened by a fraction. Good. Then you understand why I asked you to join me. The carriage rolled on, wheels over stone. A pause long enough to be intentional. You're examining an old file, he said at last. Not a question. A domestic incident from Zhao Shu-ren's tenure. I said nothing. That silence, he continued pleasantly, is a wise instinct. Cultivate it. The city slid past outside the shutter, lanterns blurring into a river of light. My friend has enemies, he went on. All capable men do. What distinguishes the survivors is knowing which enemy matters. And which truths? I asked. He regarded me with open curiosity, as if I'd just revealed an interesting crack in porcelain. Truth, he said, is a flexible substance. It bends to the weight placed upon it. The carriage slowed. I won't insult you, he added, by pretending you're wrong. The file you found is inelegant, sloppy even. There were better ways to handle that situation. My jaw tightened. But it's old, he continued, buried beneath newer concerns, flood relief, infrastructure, matters that affect thousands, not one unfortunate household. One woman, I said. He sighed gently, as if I'd corrected his arithmetic rather than his morality. Exactly, he said. Scale matters. The carriage stopped. This is where I help you, he said, leaning forward. You note procedural irregularities. You recommend internal review. You allow the matter to resolve quietly. In return, your future remains smooth. And if I refuse? He studied my face, as if deciding how much honesty I could afford. Then you discover, he said, how many hands it takes to close a door. I stepped down into the street without answering. At home, the room felt too small. She was there, seated at the table, hands folded, posture perfectly still. She didn't ask. She saw it in the way I shut the door, the way my breath came shallow, the way I pressed my palm flat against the wood, as if grounding myself.
He spoke to you.
Yes.
Did he threaten you?
No, I said, then laughed once, sharp and humorless. He offered me safety. Her eyes closed briefly.
That's worse.
He said your death was inelegant, I added. Sloppy. Her fingers curled.
I was inconvenient. That's what they mean.
I crossed the room and dropped onto the stool, suddenly exhausted. If I stop now, I keep my post. I stay untouched. I become acceptable.
And if you don't?
I looked at her. Then I make enemies. She rose and came to stand behind me. Her hands settled on my shoulders, cool, steady, anchoring.
You can still walk away. I won't think you weak.
I know, I said. That's not what frightens me.
What does?
That if I do, I said, voice roughening, I'll become one of them. Another man who learned exactly where the line was and never crossed it again. She turned me around.
You'd survive.
Yes, I replied. But I wouldn't be able to look at you. Silence pressed in, heavy as held breath.
You understand what this costs. Not just danger, not just time. It will hollow you out in places you don't expect.
I'm already hollow, I said. You're the reason it echoes.
You shouldn't love a dead woman.
I shouldn't, I agreed. But here we are. Then she lifted her hand and pressed it flat against my chest, directly over my heart.
It will hurt. They'll try to break you quietly first. If that fails, loudly.
I know. If they succeed, then I fall standing, I said. Her expression broke. Pride and fear tangled together, sharp enough to wound.
Then listen to me. If you do this, you do it cleanly. You gather proof that survives fire. You make it so visible they choke on it. You do not rush. You do not act alone.
I won't, I promised. She leaned forward and rested her forehead against mine. I pulled her into my arms and she leaned into me, like her entire being settling against mine, as though the distance between our souls was dissolving. The lamp burned low. We let it. The next morning I returned the memorandum with a single line added at the bottom. Further review required due to unresolved discrepancies. I signed my name in full. That was when the kindness stopped, and the real work began. By the time the file stopped being a discrepancy and started being a pattern, even the men who loved silence began to speak carefully, not loudly. They used phrases like procedural irregularities and misfiled petitions. They coughed into their sleeves when they passed my desk. They stopped meeting my eyes in corridors where they used to nod. A few began calling me diligent, in the same tone you'd use for a dog that didn't know when to stop barking. The records did not bark. They simply refused to align. A relief ledger claimed grain delivered that a shipping log could not account for. A population register listed villages that were, by the time the report was written, already underwater. An inspection stamp appeared on a contract dated 2 days after the inspecting official had left the district. Perfect numbers, I learned, were the smoothest liars. At night, when I returned to my narrow room, I would lay the documents out on the floor, as if building a second world from paper. One in which hunger had a name, and drownings had dates, and someone's melancholy could no longer cover murder like a polite cloth over a stain. Shilmei watched without speaking for a long time. Sometimes she sat on the bed, hands folded, listening, the way you listen to a storm from indoors, half fear, half inevitability. Sometimes she came closer, knelt beside a page, fingers hovering just above the ink. She murmured once, just stunned. I had learned how powerful men protected themselves, not with swords, but with time, distance, promotions, transfers, new postings that made old rumours provincial noise. They let years pass until the story grew tired and people stopped asking. So I did the only thing a man like me could do. I made the story too large to tire out. I attached his district to drought records. I attached the drought records to starvation. I attached the starvation to missing petitions. I attached the missing petitions to falsified seals. I attached the seals to names. And at the centre of it all, like a bone buried under silk, Zhao Shuren. When I finally said it aloud, the room went colder. Not with fear, but with recognition. Shilmei's face did not change, only her eyes sharpened, as if the world had offered her the one thing it denied her in life, a target that could no longer be blurred. The next morning a sealed summons arrived, not from the district yamen, not from a provincial superior, from the capital. I held the envelope a long moment before opening it, as if the wax itself might bite. Inside, the characters were spare, brutal in their simplicity. Bring your assembled evidence. You will testify before the censorate envoy. I read it twice. My throat tightened, not with triumph, not with relief, but with the cold understanding that we had reached the edge of something that kills people, even when they are careful. When I looked up, Shilmei was already standing near the table.
You don't look happy.
I thought I would, I admitted. She came closer, holding my hands. They're taking it seriously, I said. That means...
I know,
she answered. We stood there, in a room that had once contained only failure and dust, now holding a summons heavy enough to crush a man.
They'll try to trade, or they'll try to bargain with truth like it's grain.
I won't, I said. She studied my face, memorizing it again.
Then don't go in as a man who wants revenge, but go in as a man who wants the record to stay true after you're gone.
The words struck harder than they should have. I swallowed. Are you afraid? I asked. Shilmei's mouth curved, small, sad.
I've been afraid longer than you've been alive. The difference is, this time, the fear has a direction.
She placed her palm right over the frantic beat of my heart.
Breathe. You'll need your voice.
And I did. Because the next time, I spoke in a hall full of men. The ink would not be mine alone. It would be the Empire's. The trial was not held in our provincial hall. It was too large for that. Too dangerous. The crimes we pinned to his name, embezzled disaster grain, falsified relief registers, bribes hidden inside, Gifts, levees built to collapse, had killed more people than any sword he might have drawn. Such things were not for a local magistrate to judge, so the emperor sent a censorate envoy, one of the empire's sharpest knives. His presence alone meant one thing: someone will die. The hall they chose was vast and bare, its rafters high enough that every word thrown upwards came back thin and cold. Officials lined the sides like rows of lacquered masks. The air smelled faintly of dust, old ink, and fear. Zhao Shiren, the man who killed Xu Mei, was brought in, chained at the wrists. He tried to look composed. His robe was immaculate, his hair perfectly dressed. But his eyes kept flicking to the doors, to the windows, to the envoy's expressionless face. A censorate trial is a different world. In that room, rank is only another line in the record. The only real question is whether they want you saved or cut away. The envoy sat in the highest seat, his features carved from stone. "Proceed," he said. I stepped forward, scrolls in hand. My voice came out steady. I don't know how. Began with grain. I showed how the population registers had been quietly altered, how dead villagers remained alive on paper so their rations could be claimed and diverted. I laid out shipping logs that contradicted each other in just the right places. I read testimonies from drovers who had watched grain turned aside to private storehouses while villages starved. I could feel the hall listening, not out of sympathy, out of calculation. Then I turned to floods. I presented the levy contracts, impossible timber weights at suspiciously generous prices. Inspections signed and sealed by men who later admitted, under questioning, that they had never seen the site. Reports calling a collapse an unforeseen natural disaster, written the same week a contractor's son bought a house larger than his entire extended family could fill. Hundreds drowned, bodies buried in haste under orders to preserve public calm. The envoy tapped a finger once against the bench. "You were responsible for these approvals?" he asked the accused. Zhao Shiren's mouth opened. "I was misled. My subordinates. These are malicious fabrications." Sweat shone at his temples. The envoy's expression did not shift. "Bring the witnesses," he said. They came in one by one. Clerks, pale and shaking but resolute. Engineers, their hands still scarred with calluses. Grain workers with cracked palms. A woman whose husband had never come home from the flood. Each bowed. Each spoke. Each added another stone to the pile that was already pressing him down. Zhao Shiren began to shake, just enough that the chains at his wrists clinked when he raised his hands. Through it all, I kept my eyes on the envoy, not on him. If I looked too long at the man who had once shoved a woman down a staircase and walked away with a promoting, I would forget the levies and say words the room was not ready to hear. When the witnesses were done, the envoy folded his hands. "Do you deny that you benefited from bribery, falsified imperial records, and neglected your duty in ways that led directly to mass death?" Zhao Shiren swallowed. Sweat gleamed on his forehead. His voice cracked. "I cannot deny it. But I was misled. My subordinates. These are malicious fabrications." Zhao Shiren stammered, sweat shining at his temples. The hall exhaled as if it had been holding its breath for years. The envoy nodded once, sharply. "Then the judgment is clear," he said. He rose. "All crimes involving imperial funds, falsified reports, and dereliction of duty resulting in the deaths of the people," he pronounced, voice slicing through the air, "are punishable by death. It will be held at noon in 7 days in front of the plaza." The chains rattled as Zhao Shiren collapsed to his knees. He did not look at me. He did not look at the envoy. But as the guards dragged him away, he turned his head slightly, eyes darting past my shoulder to a patch of empty air where the light seemed thinner, the cold a little deeper. He shuddered. He did not know what he was sensing. I did. "Execution at dawn," the envoy finished. Then it was over. Somewhere in the capital, men would nod and say someone had finally taken out a rotten plank. None of them would know I had not been working for the emperor. I bowed to the envoy. "Justice is its own reward," I said. The words tasted like iron on my tongue. Outside, the courtyard was all stone and shadow. A single tree leaned over the wall, its branches stirring in a wind that hadn't been there the day before. I stepped beneath it. My knees felt oddly weak. My hands were still humming with the memory of holding papers that could kill a man.
You did it.
Her voice was soft, familiar, close enough that my chest tightened. I turned. She stood a few paces away, thinner now, edges pale, like ink washed too often, like a line rewritten until the paper began to show through. "I didn't see you inside," I said.
You couldn't. Not in front of heaven's knife.
"Did you hear the judgment?" She nodded. Her eyes were tired, but there was satisfaction there too, dark and deep, like water finally breaking through a dam.
He deserved worse. But this will do.
The breath went out of me in a long, shaking exhale. "I thought I would feel triumphant," I admitted. "Instead, I just feel empty."
You pulled down a whole tower of lies. Sometimes what's left is rubble and silence. You carried my story, even when you didn't speak my name. You carried theirs too, the hungry, the drowned, the dismissed. You made sure the record could no longer pretend they never existed.
"I did it for you," I said.
I know. That's why I have to do this.
Something cold slid into my ribs at those words. "Do what?" She looked up at me, and I saw it. The other thing in her gaze. Not just pride, not just relief. Grief.
You feel it, don't you?
And I did. The heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with fear. The way my limbs had grown sluggish. How breath came a little shorter than it should for a man my age. The hollow echo in my heartbeat when the trial ended, like a drum half covered by earth. "Yes," I murmured. "I know."
I can't stay.
The words landed like a blow. "Not now," I rasped. "Not after this."
You're standing too close to my side of the river. Another month, perhaps two, and your life.
She pressed her palm flat against my chest. "I don't care," I said, too fast, too raw. "If staying with you costs me years, then—"
I care.
She cut in. Her voice broke on the last word.
You still have time. Work to do. People to help. Laws to write that keep other women from being buried under convenient words. If I stay, the pool between us will drag you across before you're finished.
"You think I care about being finished?" I demanded. "I only care about—"
About me? I know. And that is exactly why I have to go.
She whispered. Her thumb moved once over my ribs, as if memorizing the rhythm beneath. "Don't," I said. It came out like a plea dragged over stones. "Don't leave me again. Not now. Not after all this." Tears burned behind my eyes. "When is it ever time?" I demanded. "Who decides that? The coroner who wrote Melancholy? The clerk who copied lies? Why do they get all those extra years, and you?"
And me. Yes, it's unfair.
"How can you sound so calm?" I asked.
I'm clinging to every bit of courage you lent me. I love you.
Her outline was already thinner, as if the light behind her had brightened. I closed the space between us and reached for her, desperate. My hand met something that felt almost warm, as if the world were giving us a final, reluctant mercy. "I love you," I whispered. "In this life, in the next, in every line I write until my hand fails." Her eyes shone.
I know.
Then she took another step back, and another. With each one, her form blurred, not vanishing in a flicker, but slowly, like ink washed from silk. The courtyard remained solid. The trees swayed. The world went on. Only she disappeared. When the last trace of her faded, the yard felt suddenly enormous and horribly empty, like someone had removed a wall I'd been leaning on without warning. "Xiumei!" No answer. I screamed again, and my voice cracked on the second syllable. By the time I stopped, my throat burned, and I could hardly stand. That night, I did not sleep, nor the next, nor the many after. I opened her book so often the binding began to loosen. The margins were still there, her handwriting still sharp and alive, but the air above the pages stayed stubbornly empty. I walked the roads where we had talked. I paused by doorways where she liked to stand and comment on people's shoes. I lit lamps in every corner of my room and sat awake until dawn, hoping shadow and light would shape her silhouette for me again. Sometimes I thought I felt her, a breath of cold air across my cheek, a pressure at my shoulder where her hand used to rest. Every time I turned, there was nothing. Days became months, months became years. I rose in rank, I signed orders, I wrote new procedures for disaster relief that required multiple independent tallies of grain and population. I buried tricks in the language that made it harder to erase people from records without leaving smudges a clerk like me would notice. I honoured the vow I made in a narrow, leaking room with a ghost listening across a table. Every case I took, I asked myself, what would have happened to her if someone like me had been sitting at that desk then? Every time I saw a line that smelled like a lie, I thought of melancholy and sharpened my brush. From the outside, it would have looked like a respectable life. Inside, every night, when the last petition was stamped and the last candle trimmed, my hand would drift without thinking to the space beside me. Empty. The emptiness grew heavier than any ledger I had ever carried. My hair turned white. My hand began to tremble when I wrote. My breath shortened on cold mornings. And still, I searched in the small, ridiculous ways that were left to me. I sat under flowering trees in spring and watched the petals fall, remembering a rooftop, a plum tree, a girl who refused to be owned. Even when I stopped believing she would appear again in this world, I could not stop looking. Because love is stubborn. Because grief becomes a daily practice. Because she had left to save me, and I had never found a way to thank her face to face. So I thanked her in ink. Every stroke I wrote against injustice was alert letter she would never read. And I waited, slowly, painfully, year after year, for the day the river between us would finally narrow enough for me to cross. Years later, after I recovered from a bad cold in a sunny winter day, I felt unusually full of energy. When I stepped out of my room, I saw a tree of pale plum blossoms, and beneath it, my adopted son was playing with my grandson and granddaughter. When the two little ones saw me, they came running, laughing, their arms reaching up to be picked up. I looked at their bright faces and felt the warmth of their hugs. I smiled, and it felt as if this page of my life was finally turning. That night, before my adopted son snuffed out the candles in my room, he wished me a good sleep. I smiled and told him to take good care of this family. He was slightly shocked by the way I spoke and hurried to beg me not to talk like that. I squeezed his hand and closed my eyes. When I opened them, I was standing on a stone bridge, smooth, old, lit by a light with no sun behind it. To my left stretched a quiet river, black as ink. My legs did not ache. My breath did not tremble. I did not feel old. When I stepped forward, I saw her. She was sitting on a bench beneath a pear blossom tree, exactly as she had been the day she left me, as if no time had passed at all. Yan Xiu Mei! I started running, the way I had when I was a young man. She turned and saw me, her face lit with recognition, with the soft joy of someone whose beloved has finally walked through the door they were always meant to walk through.
You're here.
I pulled her into my arms. How long? I asked. How long have you been waiting? She smiled and shook her head lightly.
For me? Moments. Nothing at all.
I felt my throat tighten. For me? I whispered. It was a lifetime. Behind her, the river shimmered, and the pear blossoms loosened in the breeze, drifting like snow across the bridge.